Not having Trebor Pena tomorrow night could hurt Syracuse's short passing game.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are breaking down the loss of Trebor Pena, who is not going to play tomorrow night against Pitt, according to Fran. I'm going to tell you why later on in the show that, yes, Trebor Pena is a star wide receiver for Syracuse, but the Orange still have plenty of weapons and therefore no excuses not to get it done on offense against Pitt. Plus, who could step up? Who are some under-the-radar guys who could step up in the absence of Trebor Pena tomorrow night? But first, we're going to break down where the loss of Trebor Pena could hurt Syracuse. More specifically, it's the short passing game. But before we get to all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, according to Fran Brown, Trebor Pena will be off tomorrow night against Pitt. He just did not look like himself in practice and therefore will not play in a critical ACC game against the Pitt Panthers tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Where the loss of Trebor Pena really hurts Syracuse, as I have said already on this podcast, is in the short passing game. At the midway point, I told you guys some of the strengths of Syracuse's offense. And the biggest strength, in my opinion, is their short passing game. And I told you guys a couple of reasons why. Number one, it's Kyle McCord, their quarterback, of course. He does an excellent job getting rid of the ball on time, right? He gets rid of the ball super quickly, probably one of the quickest releases in the entire nation. It's also anticipation, being able to see the field at the line of scrimmage, knowing where to go with the football before the play is even going on. But number two, it was Syracuse's wide receiver personnel that could really make it effective, and it starts with Trebor Pena. It starts with him. He is the main guy in Syracuse's short passing game. He has had a breakout season for Syracuse and arguably their biggest surprise at the halfway point of the season. He is second in the ACC in catches, seventh in yards, third in touchdowns. So on baseline stats alone, you can obviously tell that Trebor Pena is a big loss for Syracuse. But again, it hurts Syracuse in their short passing game. And I got the advanced stats for you guys to prove my point. I'm going to put this on the screen for you guys. This is from Syracuse.com's Chris Carlson. Per PFF, okay, Pro Football Focus College, Kyle McCord has targeted Trebor Pena on short passes, which are less than 10 yards, 35 times. They have resulted in 31 completions. Tremendous chemistry. Now, I could tell you guys with just purely through the eye test that those two, McCord to Pena, have been hyper efficient at the halfway point of the season, right? You could look at the baseline statistics for both of those players and you'd be able to tell, right? But that is absurd. 31 of 35 in short passes is 88.5% completion rate. That is ridiculous efficiency. Ridiculous efficiency. If it was 70%, I would say that's pretty good. It's at 88.5%. That is amazing. That is how good Kyle McCord has been throwing the football to Trebor Pena in the short passing game. So yeah, not having Trebor Pena against Pitt tomorrow night, while again, I'm going to get to it later on, it's no excuse. This is where it could hurt Syracuse. 31 of 35 when he's targeted within 10 yards. Think about that. 31 of 35. That is obscene. And there's more advanced stats for you guys. This isn't necessarily specific to short passing game, but it could be just an overall point. That's an advanced statistic. Again, I'll put this on the screen, and this is coming from Syracuse.com's Chris Carlson. According to PFF College, no receiver in the country has been better on contested catches than Trebor Pena. He's had 11 opportunities to make contested catches and hauled in 10. That is 90.9%, followed by Temple's Dante Wright and Colorado's Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter? Travis Hunter. I'm sorry for skipping over Dante Wright. He's an excellent receiver over at Temple, but Travis Hunter, you're doing something right if you are in the same category as Colorado's Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter is maybe the best all-around player in college football because he's an excellent corner and an excellent receiver. He's like almost like Shohei Ohtani of college football. Even if you're in the same ballpark in whatever statistic it is with Travis Hunter, you are doing something right. And Trebor Pena has been more efficient on contested catches than Travis Hunter. And I'm like leaving out Dante Wright, who again is a pretty good receiver over at Temple. Oh my goodness. So yes, this is obviously a tough loss for Syracuse. It's a tough one. You can't deny it. The fact that Kyle McCord has been so efficient targeting Pena in the short passing game within 10 yards, it's incredible to watch. And you could tell through the eye test. The fact that Trebor Pena makes contested catches at a 90% clip, really? Those are incredible statistics. And yeah, Trebor Pena has been a breakout player for Syracuse this season. So not having him against Pitt tomorrow night, it's a tough loss. And it hurts their short passing game, which has arguably been the team's biggest strength at the halfway point of the season. Okay? So I think we have done enough on the doom and gloom of not having Trebor Pena. Okay? We've done enough on that. But going forward on this podcast, okay, we're going to talk about who could step up in the absence of Trebor Pena. We know the stars, okay? But who are some under-the-radar guys that can step up, right? We're going to get to those two players in a moment. And plus, later on, all right, maybe those two guys might not step up, the guys I'm going to mention later on in the podcast. But, look, Syracuse football, they still got enough weapons to overcome this injury. So, once again, the loss of Trebor Pena, more specifically, it hurts Syracuse in their short passing game tomorrow night against Pitt. He's currently dealing with a two-pronged injury. It was a concussion, which it seems like he has passed the protocol, and also a lower body injury. He suffered it against NC State. He just wasn't looking like himself in practice, according to Fran Brown. So he's going to be off tomorrow night, all right? But Syracuse football is still going to have to get it done. And coming up, here are two players that could have their welcome to Syracuse moments tomorrow night against Pitt. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And guys, LinkedIn is a thing that I use all the time to find the latest job opportunities, but LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. There are two under-the-radar guys who could really step up and have their welcome to Syracuse moment in the absence of Trebor Pena, who once again, the star slot receiver, will not play, according to Fran Brown, tomorrow night against Pitt. Hopefully, this is not a long-term injury, but he's not going to play tomorrow night against Pitt. And guys, hopefully someone can step up in his absence. The first player that has the opportunity to have their quote-unquote welcome to Syracuse moment How about four-star true freshman? That's right, four-star true freshman, Emanuel Ross. Emanuel Ross does not have a catch this season, and he's also been dealing with injuries this year, and it's not a guarantee that he plays tomorrow night, but I think according to Fran Brown that it's looking good and that he's trending in the right direction, but we'll see. Let's assume, let's be optimistic here. Let's assume that Emanuel Ross does play for Syracuse. Do we know exactly what Emanuel Ross is going to bring? I'll be honest with you. I got no clue. This is a true freshman that doesn't have a single catch this season. We know he has a lot of talent. He was a four-star out of high school, right? We have yet to really see him on the field, though. Okay, we've yet to really see him. But if you're looking for a one-for-one replacement to Trebor Pena, it's actually Emanuel Ross. It's him. Because when you look at the depth chart, Emanuel Ross is listed behind Trebor Pena as a slot receiver. I do kind of find it fascinating because Emanuel Ross is 6'2", 200 pounds. That is not exactly the body archetype of a slot receiver. Typically, slot receivers are a little bit smaller. Is that fair to say? They're usually a little bit smaller, right? But Emanuel Ross on the depth chart is listed behind Trebor Pena as the wide receiver 3, a.k.a. the slot receiver on a football team, right? Ross is listed once again, 6'2", 200 pounds. When I had Locked On recruiting expert Brian Smith on the podcast over the summer, we talked about all the prospects really of who Syracuse got in 2024, 2025, 2026. You get the idea. But we talked about Emanuel Ross on the podcast, and he said that Ross is more of a jump ball wide receiver. At least that's what he was in high school. So again, it's kind of curious that he's the backup slot receiver to Trebor Pena, right? I'm not sure he's the same route runner. Maybe he's got more pure talent than him. It's possible. I'm not exactly sure, but Trebor Pena's got a lot of talent. So it'll be interesting to see that, assuming Emanuel Ross, if he is healthy and he can go tomorrow night against Pitt, if he is used, and how often he is used for Syracuse. He is the first under-the-radar guy who could step up in the absence of Trebor Pena, all right? Once again, Emanuel Ross, a four-star true freshman. Number 2, we talked a lot about this guy on the podcast. And once again, we had a lot of high hopes for this guy on the podcast. But this could be his chance. This could be his opportunity. It's Justus Ross-Simmons, the Colorado State transfer. Last week, or not last week, but last game against NC State, in the build-up to it, remember, Fran Brown said in his pregame press conference that, hey, getting a guy like Justus Ross-Simmons fully healthy, it's like adding a big-time free agent to your team, and that he could have a big role against NC State. Well, he didn't have a single catch against the Wolfpack. I don't even think he was targeted. In fact, Justus Ross-Simmons to this point has played in 3 games for Syracuse and doesn't have a catch this year. So the two guys that I'm mentioning really are under the radar because neither of them have a catch this year, but both could see an uptick in playing time with no Trebor Pena on the field. He's yet to record a catch this season once again, but on the depth chart, the reason why I don't have him maybe ahead of Emanuel Ross as far as the two likely guys and why I listed Ross first is because if you look at where Justus Ross-Simmons is listed on the depth chart, he's behind Amari Hatcher. Amari Hatcher is a starting outside wide receiver. And remember, Trebor Pena is a starting slot receiver. So it's possible that they maybe shift around a little bit and have Justus Ross-Simmons move to the slot. That's possible. It could definitely happen. But if you're looking for a one-for-one, I think it would be more likely to be Emanuel Ross. Is that fair to say? But regardless, Justus Ross-Simmons, this could be his chance. This could be his chance to have that Wally Pitt moment, right? I talked about how he had been dealing with injury, a nagging hamstring injury at the end of training camp that bled into the start of the regular season. We thought that he could be a starting receiver on Syracuse football heading into the year, but obviously the injury, the hamstring injury hurt his chances there. And since that moment, multiple receivers have snatched that role away from him. Amari Hatcher took that role away from him, right? We thought that Zede Haynes would be the wide receiver 1, but the wide receiver 2 we thought would be Justus Ross-Simmons. Umari Hatcher took his spot. And he still has it according to the depth chart. He's played pretty well, Umari Hatcher. Right? He's played pretty well. I think we'd all agree with that. And then Jackson Meeks has been a revelation. He's been a breakout player, and we'll talk about it more on the next segment when we talk about how Syracuse football still has plenty of weapons to be able to get it done. Right? So Justus Ross-Simmons, he really hasn't gotten that opportunity yet because the receivers that either were behind him at the start of the year or were close to him at the start of the year, they've all played extremely good football. So therefore, Justus Ross-Simmons has just not been given the chance. Well, there's no Trebor Pena. Maybe this is the time for Justus Ross-Simmons to finally have his welcome to Syracuse moment, to take a starting wide receiver spot by the horn. Maybe this is his chance. All right. So those are two guys that are under the radar that could see an uptick in playing time, and maybe they have their welcome to Syracuse moments, and that is Emanuel Ross, a true freshman wide receiver, 4-star in the class of 2024, and Justus Ross-Simmons, a Colorado State transfer who we had high hopes for him, but unfortunately just hasn't gotten that opportunity quite yet. Maybe tomorrow night against Pitt is his chance. So far on the podcast, we've talked about where Trebor Pena could hurt Syracuse, or not having him could hurt Syracuse, and that is in their short passing game, right? 31 of 35 when targeted within 10 yards. Incredibly efficient. Great in contested catches, right? So not having him hurts. We talked about why it hurts. We just talked about, obviously, who are some under-the-radar guys who could step up for Syracuse in the absence of Trebor Pena, and hopefully it's not a long-term injury, right? But coming up, guess what, guys? Syracuse football has got enough weapons that they can survive this injury. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And if you're looking at the money line and the point spread right now for Syracuse football against Pitt, it's actually moved in favor of Pitt. Syracuse football yesterday was a 5.5-point underdog. Now they are 6.5-point underdogs to Pitt tomorrow night, probably due to the loss of Trebor Pena, right? Probably not going to play. Syracuse's money line also moved to plus 172. I believe yesterday it was either plus 166 or plus 168, somewhere in that range, but it's moved slightly in favor of Pitt as well. But we're road underdogs again, right? We're road underdogs just like we were against UNLV. Hopefully it's the same outcome as that game. You can check those odds out on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. Guess what, guys? Syracuse football, even without Trebor Pena, and yes, it's a tough loss, they still have enough weapons to where there is no excuse for this offense not to be efficient against Pitt tomorrow night. Period. All right? They got enough talent that they could still beat this Pitt team without Trebor Pena. Not having Trebor Pena, again, I've broken it down. It sucks. It could hurt their short passing game a little bit. They are still without Zede Haynes. Zede Haynes is out with a family issue, and we just hope everything is okay in that regard, but he still hasn't played either. So they're down 2 of their top 3 wide receivers at the beginning of the season, right? When they took the field against Ohio, their top 3 wide receivers were Zede Haynes, Umari Hatcher, and Trebor Pena. Only Umari Hatcher is left of those 3 for tomorrow night against Pitt. But there are no excuses for this offense not to succeed. They have enough star power and enough depth to get it done. All right? Even if they don't get contributions from Emanuel Ross or Justus Ross-Simmons, and another guy I would like to throw in that hat is Darryl Gill. And the reason why I didn't mention Darryl Gill, because he's not necessarily an under-the-radar guy, right? He's actually seen some playing time. He's had some nice moments. So he's a good depth piece. We know what Darryl Gill is, and that's why I wanted to mention Emanuel Ross and Justus Ross-Simmons, right? But even if you don't get contributions from those 3 tomorrow night, you got plenty of star power. This is unlike any other year for a bit for Syracuse football. They got enough weapons on this offense. They can get it done even without Trebor Pena. even without Zeke Haynes. They can do it, right? Number one, I don't know about you guys, but let us not forget that Syracuse football has an All-American tight end on their roster in Oronde Gadsden. Aside from a couple of down games against Stanford, against Holy Cross, right? He had a couple of down games where he had like 3 catches in a 2-game span there. I would say he's lived up to expectations as an All-American caliber tight end this season, right? Is that fair to say? So you got an All-American tight end. That's a great start. That's a good start with the amount of weapons you got on your offense. An All-American. Number 2, Syracuse football has another breakout wide receiver aside from Trebor Pena, right? And that is Georgia transfer Jackson Meeks. Jackson Meeks has thrived as the number 1 outside receiver for Syracuse football since taking over, I believe, in the Stanford game. That's when he was officially given the role because Zeke Haynes was ruled out for that one. In the last 3 games for Jackson Meeks, he has caught at least 8 passes in each of them, has 2 100-yard games. He has a touchdown in all 3 games, and one of those touchdowns was the game-tying catch against UNLV at the end of regulation. He's got more than 3 times the amount of receiving yards this season as he had in 3 years at Georgia. Jackson Meeks has also been a breakout wide receiver for Syracuse football, and you still got him ready to go. And Fran Brown said they are a better football team with Jackson Meeks on the roster. And he's going to play against Pitt tomorrow night. So, you got Oronde Gadsden. You got Jackson Meeks. 2 of the better players, 2 of the better pass catchers in the ACC, if not the country. I would say already you're at enough weapons. LeQuint Allen, how about him? He's one of the best receiving backs in the conference, if not the country. Again, on pace for over 60 catches this year, and last year he had 38 of them. An all-purpose back like LeQuint Allen. And you got his backup Yassine Willis, right? You got backup tight end Dan Villari. You got enough star power, and you got enough depth pieces to where does a loss of Trebor Pena hurt Syracuse? It does. But should it really influence the result of the game tomorrow night against Pitt? No. There are no excuses for this offense not to get it done against Pitt. They have enough star power. They have enough depth. They can still have a very, very good offensive night against a Pitt defense that is not exactly the Legion of Boom. All right? They do not have the Legion of Boom secondary back there. That's no disrespect to Pitt. All right? But their strength is their pass rush. That's their strength. They got 18 sacks in 6 games. That's an average of 3 per game, and they had 6 of them against Cal. They can rush the passer really well, but their secondary, all right, they got a good safety in McMillan. I get it. Syracuse has gone up against talented safeties and talented corners the first 6 games of the year. To me, there is no excuse for Syracuse not to get it done tomorrow night against Pitt. If you want to be a contender, if you want to be one of the premier teams in the ACC, you got to be able to overcome injuries like this. You got to be able to overcome an injury like this. We can acknowledge that it's a tough loss. We can acknowledge where it specifically could hurt Syracuse, the short passing game. But we can also keep in mind that if you want to be a contender, you got to be able to overcome injuries sometimes to even star players. And you got to see what your depth is really made of. You got to see what your other stars are really made of. And we're going to find out tomorrow night just how deep this Syracuse receiving core has been. Because I have said for weeks on this podcast, I think they got a ton of weapons. They got a lot to choose from. And on any given play, you don't necessarily know where the ball is going. But it's not necessarily a bad thing because they're ultra talented with their pass catcher. They got a ton of them. All right? This is not influencing my prediction on the game. I think Syracuse is going to win 34-31. Yep, that's right. I am making my prediction right now here on this podcast. I think that they can still get it done without Trebor Pena. Leave a comment in the comment section below how you think the loss of Trebor Pena impacts Syracuse tomorrow night. Do you still think they can get it done against Pitt, or do you think they are dead in the water? In my opinion, they can still get it done because you know what? You got an All-American tight end, you got an all-conference caliber wide receiver, and you got an all-conference caliber running back. How about that? I think they got enough to get it done tomorrow night against Pitt. Now, all right, so that covers it, I think, for the podcast portion of this podcast. But going forward, teasing ahead, all right, tomorrow morning, we got Poll Friday on a Thursday. The reason for that is, of course, because Syracuse football is playing Pitt tomorrow night. And I am not a fortune teller, so I'm not going to have Poll Friday on Friday after the game because I didn't know what's going to happen when I released the question, right? That question specifically is biggest key to defeating Pitt. When I release the episode, which will be 10 to 15 minutes, I will let you all know. That is coming tomorrow morning, all right? After the game tomorrow night, hopefully we're going to be celebrating a win all together. Syracuse football hopefully will be 6-1 at that point, 3-1 in the ACC, and in prime spot to maybe contend, hopefully. There will be a post-game recap episode going over the game, then another follow-up episode either on that Friday afternoon or Saturday morning. So that is what's coming up on the Locked On Syracuse podcast in the coming days. Thank you all for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On ACC podcast, Alex Dono and Kenta Gibbs. They keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. And I believe they just released their podcast specifically previewing the Syracuse Pitt game, so be sure to check that one out. You can find it on the Locked On ACC channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you liked this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And everyone, take care.